I'm interested in this topic, especially with moving house recently. And you realize how much you've got. And it's books and notes and oh dear. Yeah, so I'm excited about this one today, Valerie. And just before we start, I am going to just show the other community cafes that are coming up so that people can get an idea of what's on the agenda. And we have, she was leading coach education at Henley Business School. We have Karen Foy, who's delivering twice in a day. She's got a new book out, which is, it's fantastic. I've got it. Going Beyond the Competencies, really all about presence and that great stuff to do with coaching. And so we've got, if I go with UK, 8 a.m. UK, and we've got 8 p.m. UK for that. There's quite a lot signed up for those. We've also got the theme of neurodiversity in May. So what really works? So this one is for professionals. For example, if you're coaching someone who's got neurodiversity, but then we've also got a different session a little bit later, which is about organizations and what organizations HR, L&D, OD need to be able to support their people. And then we've got a marketing piece with Mary, which is something we don't do quite as much of in the community cafes. And added will also, I'm doing some demos for, and some of the faculty are for International Coaching Week. So they'll be added soon. Then we've got Michael over in the States on emotional intelligence in July. And we've got this one we had to book way ahead of time. Equity, diversity, inclusion and belonging with Akina in October. And that's that. So goes back to the beginning of the carousel there. Valerie, really appreciate you being with us today. I've got my paper here to be taking notes and can't wait to hear all of the great stuff you're going to share. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Do you need that I spotlight myself for the recording, or you keep the general view?
That would be good. It ends up, for those who can't attend, it does end up better that way. And we are recording. We normally put these on our YouTube channel. If anyone afterwards feels, you know, there was something they said, for example, that they don't want out there, just let us know. We don't post it for 24 hours, so you can have that little window. Thank you.
All right.
Enjoy.
So good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone, depending on where you are. And thank you for being here. Before we start, I'd like to invite you into a quick reflection. Think about a client you've coached. Have you ever worked with someone who knew exactly what they should do? They had the plan, they had the insight, they even agreed with the next step, and yet they still couldn't move forward. As coaches, when we encounter this situation, our instinct is often to look for the usual explanation. Maybe the client lacks clarity. Maybe motivation is missing. Maybe they need more accountability. Maybe discipline is the issue. But over the years, through my work in trauma-informed decluttering and coaching, I began to notice something really different. Often the problem isn't that clients don't know what to do. The problem is that they are already carrying too much. They're carrying things that are visible and many things that are invisible. Experience, memories, expectation, responsibility, stories about themselves. And sometimes these things accumulate the same way clutter accumulates in a home. Quietly, gradually, until one day it becomes difficult to move. That That realization led me to a simple metaphor that guides the work I do today. Because in life, people carry three kinds of stuff. They carry the physical stuff, the object around. They carry the emotional stuff, experience, grief, guilt, memory. And they carry cognitive stuff, the belief and story that shape how they see themselves and their life. And when all of that accumulate together, it becomes really heavy. Sometimes so heavy that even the most motivated person cannot move forward. So today I'd like to explore something with you. What happens when we help people put that stuff down? What happens when we look at clutter not just as a problem of organization, but as a reflection of something deeper? And how, as coach, we can support our client in releasing the weight that may be holding them back so they can finally move forward with clarity, calm, and self-trust. So that idea of, let me start the slide. So that idea of the stuff we carry, it became more than just a metaphor for me. It actually emerged. I want to see everyone. Give me 1 second. It actually emerged from something I was witnessing again and again and again in my work. Years ago, when I first started helping people declutter their home, I thought my job was very straightforward. I assumed I was helping people organize their place, sort things, create systems, clear rooms. But very quickly, I realized that something else was happening in those homes, something much deeper than organization. A client will pick up an object and suddenly they become emotional. Sometimes they would freeze. Sometimes they would tell a story. Sometimes they would say something like, I know I should get rid of this. I just can't. And this happened once, twice, many, many times, again and again and again. And eventually I realized something important. Clutter was really about organization. It wasn't about laziness. It wasn't about discipline. And it certainly wasn't about someone not knowing how to declutter. Instead, what I was seeing was that the object carried emotional weight. And over time, as we worked with more clients, we began noticing something remarkable. 95% of the people we work with had emotional or trauma-related barrier. That's what connect them to their possession. That statistics change everything for me because it means that when we walk into a cluttered home, we are not just looking at objects. We are often looking at stories. We're looking at memories. We're looking at a chapter of someone's life that may not be finished yet. For example, an item may represent a relationship that ends, a loved one who passed away, a version of themselves they once were, a dream they thought they would live. So what appeared to be clutter may actually be connected to grief, identity, fear, or unfinished emotional experience. And this is where things become important for us as coaches. Because object often becomes container for meaning. They hold memory, identity, emotional experience that may never have been fully processed. So when we ask someone to declutter, what we actually may be asking is something that is really much more complex than just sorting. We may ask them to confront loss, identity transition, painful moment, unresolved trauma. And that's why decluttering feels overwhelming or even impossible. But when we approach it with curiosity, compassion, and a trauma-informed lens, someone different begins to happen. Instead of simply removing objects, we begin helping people release the emotional weight attached to them. And that's when the real transformation begins. Decluttering stops being about the house. It becomes about freeing the person. What we see physically is often just a surface layer. Underneath that layer, there are usually other forms of clutter that are much less visible. So over time, I began to notice that stuff tends to fall into three different layers that interact with each other. I mentioned them already. There's the physical stuff. This is the visible clutter in someone's environment. The piles of paper on a desk, the closet filled with things, the boxes that never been opened, or the Amazon delivery boxes that we keep. Room that slowly accumulate object over time. Like I put them in that room and I close the door. This is usually where people think the problem begins. But in many cases, it's actually where the problem shows up, not where it starts. Because beneath the physical clutter, there's often a second layer, the emotional stuff. This layer is all about the emotional experience people carry with them: grief, guilt, shame, fear, loss. Some words that are not big words in terms of number of letters they have, but that can feel really heavy. And these emotions are connected to specific objects: a box of belonging from a loved one who passed, clothes from a period of life that had changed, item connected to a relationship that ended. The object remain because the emotional experience connected to them has not yet been resolved. And then there's the third layer. The third layer is all about the cognitive stuff. That's the belief and story people carry around about themselves and about their life. For example, I may need this someday. I shouldn't waste it. This was expensive. My mother gave this to me. What if she noticed that I don't have it anymore? Or something even deeper, such as I'm not organized. I'm bad at this. I've already failed before. These stories influence how people relate to their environment and their possession. And when their three layers accumulate together, something happens. The weight becomes overwhelming. The environment becomes harder to manage. Decision becomes harder to make. And every capable people can begin to feel stuck. This is why simply telling someone, oh, get organized, go do some decluttering in your house, just clear that out, doesn't work. Because it's only addressing one layer of the problem. So in those moments, people will declutter their countertop, but a couple weeks after, it will be back. When we don't address all the layer, clutter is coming back. Just like a pendulum, you let it go, it come back. You let it go, it come back. So instead of focusing on the clutter we see, we begin to understand the weight the person is carrying. And when we help people gently release some of that weight, movement forward becomes much easier. And coaching can become a space where clients begin to put some of that stuff down. We doesn't need to be in the room with the person necessarily to tackle these layers. So when I start seeing clutter through these three lenses, it became very clear to me that many clients, they're intelligent, capable, motivated. Otherwise, they would have tried again and again and again and again. They are motivated. They understood what needs to be done. They want the change, but they still feel stuck. And that made me realize something important. The challenge is not about strategy or action. The challenge is about how safe the client feels to face what is underneath. It's about safety and trust. And this is where the idea of trauma-informed coaching becomes very relevant. So many of us in this room, we have been trained in powerful coaching methodology. And traditional coaching, I'll call it traditional for today, but coaching in general is incredibly effective in many situations. It helps clients clarify goals, develop strategy, create accountability, moving forward towards meaningful change. And when clients feel regulated and psychologically safe, this process works beautifully. But insight leads to action. And action leads to progress. However, in some situations, something different happens. The client may have clarity. They may agree with the next step. They may even feel excited about the goal. But when the moment comes to act, something stops them. They hesitate. They avoid. They feel overwhelmed. And when this happens, the issue may not be a lack of motivation or discipline. Sometimes the nervous system is signaling that people is emotionally unsafe. It comes back to the physiology of the person, the biology. And this is where trauma-informed coaching adds another layer of awareness. Trauma-informed coaching does not change the goal of coaching, which is to support growth and forward movement. What it changes is how we approach that movement. It recognizes that past experience can influence how safe change feels for a person. It recognizes that certain situation, environment, or decision may activate emotional response that the client themselves may not fully understand. So instead of pushing forward more quickly, the coach becomes attentive to a few important elements. The first one is the psychological safety. Clients need to feel safe, need to feel that they are not judged for their reaction or struggle. The second thing is pacing. Some clients move quickly, others need time to explore what is underneath their hesitation. And third, curiosity. Instead of assuming resistance, we explore what may be present for the client. For example, instead of focusing immediately on action, a coach may ask, what comes up for you when you think about making that change? Or what makes this decision difficult right now? This kind of question allows the client to explore their experience without pressure. And very often, when that space is created, something meaningful emerges. The client may discover a memory, an emotion, a belief, or an expectation they have been carrying. Not necessarily an expectation that is theirs. And once that awareness appears, something shifts. Because when people feel safe to explore what they're carrying, they are often much more capable of moving forward. This is why a trauma-informed perspective can be so valuable in coaching. It reminds us that something the most powerful support we can offer is not pushing harder, but creating the condition where the client can safely release some of the weight they have been carrying. So when we begin to approach coaching with this trauma-informed awareness, something important happens. We start paying attention not only to what the client says, but also how the client responds. Because unresolved experience rarely appear in coaching as someone saying, oh, hey, I have trauma. Instead, they tend to show up in much subtler ways: an hesitation, an avoidance, a strong emotional reaction associated with a word that seems bigger than the situation itself. So an important question for us as coaches become, how do we recognize when something deeper may be influencing the client behavior? And here, one important thing is to remember that as coach, we are not diagnosing trauma. That is not our role. However, we can learn to recognize signal that unresolved experience may be present and influencing the coaching process. And this signal appears as a pattern in the client behavior. For example, a client may have a strong emotional reaction that seems disproportionate to the situation that is discussed. Like a small decision may trigger anxiety, sadness, frustration that feels much larger than expected. The other common signal is avoidance. They may repeatedly redirect their conversation away of certain topics. They may postpone certain action again and again, even though they genuinely want to change. Or they may have decision paralysis. They want to move forward, and yet making the decision feel completely difficult. Sometimes we also hear like strong self-criticism or shame. Client may say things like, I don't understand why I can't do this. Or there must be something wrong with me. I don't know for you, but the last one, I hear it again and again and again. But these kind of statements, they can signal that client is carrying more than just a practical challenge. In decluttering, these signals often appear in very specific moments. Like if we are trying to discard item in a room, they reach an object and suddenly everything stops. They hesitate, they become emotional, and they say, I know I should let go, but I can't. That object is no longer just an object. It represents a relationship, a memory, a period of life, or part of their identity. So instead of trying to push people to let go of the object, we need to gently explore the experience. Question like, what comes up for you when you think about letting this go? Or what does this represent for you? This kind of question invites the clients to reflect on the meaning behind the reaction. And very often when clients feel safe to explore that meaning, they gain insight that were previously hidden. Because what initially looked like resistance may be connected to something much deeper, something that the client is carrying since a long, long time. I don't know how many times I do decluttering with people in their 70s, and we're talking about when they were toddlers. When we begin to notice this signal in coaching, hesitation, emotional reaction, difficulty to let go, the next step is to understand why this happened. So one thing I learned very quickly in my decluttering works is that object rarely represent the object, but an item in a home may represent the relationship, the memory, the identity, or unfinished experience. Like a box of belonging may be a loved one who passed. I know some people that have all the original box of all their small appliances in their home. They keep all the boxes. Or they have had multiple music components, stereo, and they keep them all even if they don't use it anymore. Or they had their previous computer and the previous before that under their desk just in case their new computer is failing or crashing. But they never open the last one if their computer crashed. They go get a new one. So when we ask someone to declutter, we need to be conscious of these meaning that object carries. From the outside, it may look the person simply cannot decide what to do with an object. But internally, the decision may feel connected to something really bigger, as we said. So the conversation becomes less about removing item and more about understanding the story attached to the item. So what happens when we get to the story? We realize that all these objects that carry all these stories create an environment itself that has effect. Because our home and our workspace are not neutral. They are constantly sending signals to our brain and our nervous system. We think that our place is neutral, but it is not. Our brain manages all the information at the same time. And it plays a much bigger role on our productivity and our capability to focus than what we think. Just having 18 objects around us when we work reduce our productivity, if my memory is good, is by 32%. It's huge because most people have more than 18 objects around them on their desk and on the room they are working. So let's talk for a second about when a space feels chaotic. There's the clutter. It sends a stress signal to our nervous system. What happened next? The brain interprets it as unfinished task, unresolved responsibility, lack of control. And that will activate the stress response, like as mental fatigue, difficulty concentrating, irritability, or feeling overwhelmed. But in fact, many clients describe walking into a cluttered room and immediately feeling a sense of pressure, even if they cannot explain why. Their nervous system is reacting to the environment. The brain is trying to process, where do I start? What needs attention? What is unfinished? And when that signal is constant, the nervous system remains in a state of low-level stress. The stress is always there. And over time, that affects focus, decision-making, productivity, emotional regulation, basically what we call the executive function. On the other end, when a space feels calm and organized, the signals to the brain are completely different. The environment communicates safety, order, predictability. And when those signals are present, the nervous system can begin to relax. So the brain shifts from survival mode into a state that allows to clear thinking, creativity, problem solving, emotional balance. This is why decluttering isn't just about making a space look better. It's about creating an environment that supports calm, clarity, and well-being. And when client begins to experience that shift, something interesting happens. They start to feel calmer internally, which make them having the capability to make decisions and move forward. So we've seen that people carry physical, emotional, cognitive layer of stuff. We've also seen that object can hold meaning and memories, and our environment influence our nervous system. So what happened is, taking in consideration of all of that, I say me and my husband, we created what we call the Do Well method. So the Do Well method, DO is for decluttering and organizing well, Do Well method, is really about an approach to decluttering, but differently. Instead of beginning with the physical environment, we begin with the person. Because when someone is overwhelmed, stressed, or emotionally burdened, asking them to immediately make decisions about their belongings, that can feel impossible. So we have a 4-step process. The very first step is about releasing the stress. Many people who struggle with clutter live in that sense of pressure. And their nervous system is so stressed since decades that they're not able to make decisions. Because when you're too stressed and you have too much cortisol in your body, the executive function in the frontal lobe of the brain, they get slowed down. So people are just not able to make the decision, and it's physiological. It's not because they don't want to make decision. So we reduce the stress so they can think clearly, process emotion, and making decision. And that brings us to the second step, that is decluttering the mind. This is where we address the mental clutter, the internal overwhelm, the unfinished decision, the too many priorities, the expectation from others, the self-criticism, and constant mental noise. This stage will focus on helping clients gaining clarity and perspective. So at the end of that stage, they're able to see what truly matters to them, what they are holding onto mentally, and what they may be ready to release before they're able to make those decisions. After that, we pass a little bit of time on discovering free time. This is about rediscovering their time and energy. Because most people that have a cluttered house will have a cluttered calendar. It's either completely busy or they sit on the couch and they browse on Facebook or on YouTube, and then they realize, oh my God, I lost 3 hours. It's an extreme or the other. So we help them manage their time and find when they will tackle the clutter, the physical clutter. And when we help them set their priorities, their routine, and these kind of things, they're ready and they want to declutter and they're excited to declutter. That's why the last step is simplifying the living space. Because now it's easy. In the same half hour that they were trying to do before, where they were stuck and maybe letting go of one object, now they're able to tackle a full cupboard or 2 drawers in that 30 minutes, or that pile of paper. And they really, really feel better. They're calm, balanced, and focused. So basically, there's 4 words to remind: stress, mind, time, and space. Stress, mind, time, and space. That's how we approach it. And it becomes a process of personal transformation. And when we start talking about trauma, emotional experience, and coaching, there's another question that comes up in conversation. How far should we go when trauma appears in coaching conversation? Because when we start recognizing emotional weight behind behavior, it becomes clear that many clients are carrying experience that go beyond surface level goals. So the question becomes not only what we can do as coach, but what our role should be. Understanding that boundary is extremely important, both for the client well-being and for maintaining ethical coaching practice. So when we talk about trauma-informed coaching, it's important to clarify something. Coaches are not therapists. And trauma-informed coaching does not mean that we process trauma therapeutically. Our role is different. As coach, we create space where clients can reflect, increase awareness, explore possibility, and move towards goals that are meaningful to them. A trauma-informed approach simply means that we recognize that the past experience can influence how the client responds to the situation in the present. For example, when a client feels stuck, we remain curious about what may be influencing that experience. But our work remains focused on the client present and future, not on analyzing or treating the past trauma. We can support clients by listening, by acknowledging, by asking thoughtful questions. But sometimes the exploration may naturally touch on emotional experience or past event. That's normal. We're human beings. We don't separate the past from our present when it comes to coaching. But when the conversation moves toward deep emotional processing, that is usually a signal that the client may benefit from additional professional support. So understanding that distinction allows us to remain both supportive and ethical in our coaching practice. Yes, that boundary is really, really important. And there are situations where referring a client to a mental health professional can be the most supportive and responsible step to do. This doesn't mean that coaching has failed. In fact, recognizing when additional support is needed is often a sign of strong professional awareness. So, emotional flooding, for example, like emotional response that are so intense that the client has difficulty to regulate themselves or that have difficulty to continue the conversation. That can be a sign that there's a traumatic memory that repeatedly surfaces during coaching session. The client appears distressed or overwhelmed in those moments. In this case, therapy can provide the specialized tool they need to process those experiences safely. So another question coach often asks me when learning about trauma-informed coaching is, if trauma may be present for some client, how can we make sure that our coaching conversation remains safe and supportive? In other words, how do we avoid accidentally retriggering clients? So one of the reassuring things about trauma-informed is that it does not require complicated techniques. It involves creating the right condition and respect. So allowing the client to control the pace of the conversation. Clients should never feel pushed to explore something before they are ready. And when people feel they have control over the pace, their nervous system is much likely to remain regulated. So asking questions like, what does this represent for you? Or what feels difficult about this decision? This keeps the exploration grounded in the client experience. And another principle would be to normalize emotional response. Because if the client feels shame about their reaction, it will increase their distress. So decluttering is not just about organizing your home, and coaching stop being just about solving problem. Instead, it's a process of helping people release what they have been carrying for far too long. And when people begin to release some of the weight, there's three important things that often start to return. The first one is their balance. Many people struggle with clutter and they will say, there's that pile that needs attention, that room that feels unfinished. But that constant pressure keeps their nervous system triggered. So when we do that approach, balance is coming back. The next thing that is really important is safety. So we reduce the steps so small that it becomes manageable. It becomes like they are on control. They can handle this. And slowly their nervous system will begin to relax. And the next one is self-trust. So many clients struggle with clutter because of their self-criticism. I should have figured this out by now. But when they begin making decisions, one object, one drawer, one story at a time, they start to rediscover something important. They realize they can make those decisions, they can move forward, and they can change their environment. So before we close today, I'd like to invite you to a brief reflection before the Q&A. Because this conversation is not only about our client, it's also about us. Take a moment and think about your own life, not as coaches, but simply as human beings. We all carry things, something physical, emotional, expectation. And I'd like to ask you that simple question. What is something you may be carrying right now that no longer needs to be carried? It could be a belief, a responsibility, an identity, even an expectation about things, how they are supposed to be. Just take a moment to notice what comes to mind. Now imagine what may change if you allow yourself to put that thing down. So as we finish today, I'd like to leave you with a few simple ideas. Clutter is really just about things. Our environment influences our nervous system more than we realize. And trauma-informed coaching reminds us that progress does not always come from pushing harder. Sometimes it comes from helping people release what they no longer need to carry. And finally, the most powerful question we can ask: what are you ready to put down? So decluttering is not really about removing things from a house. It's about releasing what no longer belongs in our life so that calm, clarity, and emotional freedom can take their place. I will put in the chat my contact information, and I will open for the Q&A because there's lots of things that I shared today.
Thank you, Valerie. Thanks for sharing your contact as well. Any questions? Anything you're curious about? I found it really interesting that there's the topic and there's such an iceberg under it.
There is.
Ruth, did you have a question?
I did. Nice to see you, Valerie and Dr. Claire.
Okay.
The question is, if I have a client who's stuck in doing things, so it's not necessarily decluttering, but moving forward, in your experience, how is that related to decluttering?
Most of the time, that person needs to declutter their stress. Their level of cortisol, the stress hormone, is so high that their frontal lobe is slowed down. They can see that on MRI. When the stress is too high, then they see the image and the frontal lobe doesn't have the same activities. It's almost looking like ADHD without being ADHD. So the same executive function are affected. They're not able to focus. They ask everybody to make decision for themselves because they're not able to make the decision. They get in a room to go grab something, and it's what was I coming to grab here? Their focus, their working memory, their capability to make decisions are so affected that they're stuck. And they are motivated because they're trying and trying and trying again and again and again. It's not that they want to procrastinate. It's their nervous system, their biology, their physical hormones, like the stress hormones, that prevent them from being able to take action.
Okay, more thinking to be had. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got a question as well, if I may. I hear sometimes excuses. So, oh, there isn't enough time to get organized or declutter. What's your take on that?
You know, if people have a room full of clutter, the dump room that I call, of course it will take time to sort what is in there. But if they try to do it without having done the 4 steps that I was talking, stress, mind, time, space, if they skip the 3 first steps and go directly to the decluttering, the physical object, what happens is they feel stuck. They're not able to make the decision. So it will take way longer. We have tried changing the order of the step, and it will take way longer to achieve the decluttering than healing or releasing the 3 first steps and then tackling the clutter. Like I've seen people having difficulty to, let's say in 30 minutes, difficulty to tackle what is in a drawer. And after, or what is on the top of their fridge, And after doing the 3 first steps, they can tackle a whole room in 2 hours because they are aligned with themselves. They don't have the cortisol through the roof anymore, so they are able to make those decisions. And when I say in 2 hours, I'm generous. I've seen somebody that some people will call hoarders, that has piles on the floor, walking on things, countertop full in the kitchen. In an hour session, the kitchen is functional. No more things in the countertop except 1 or 2 small appliances, floor completely free. And not because they move the clutter in another room, because they tackle it. What needs to go to recycling or donation or garbage is at the right place. I've worked with people that were almost evaluated for eviction. I was their last resource. Sometimes I go on site, sometimes I just work via Zoom. I don't need to be there to help them be able to release, if that makes sense.
And I think it also talks to, just like when you've got a coach in the gym, you do that extra kilometer.
Yeah.
Any other questions, anyone?
Thank you, Valeria, so much. May I? I just have a question. This is Ghada. Sorry, I cannot open the camera right now. It's a very interesting topic. Just I have a questions. Not in the coaching session. Is there like a tool we could support our clients? Like maybe this is something you need to do. Like I will not say a checklist. Maybe steps. You can do it by your own. So
What
like
the client can do by their own, you mean?
Yeah, like, but easy steps, like it's easy is to say it, but I mean, maybe if we give them like tools or exercise, something that might help them as well to practice if possible.
Yeah, there's a lot. In fact, when I work with clients, I have kind of an online platform with courses where I will teach them different whether it's mindfulness or mandala or grounding or crystal. There's a lot of different exercise, but that are teach in parallel of the coaching happening. But one of the tools that I will give for everybody here is when you touch something, this is when right away you have all those memories and those feelings with the object. This is when it's, oh, that's that person who gave it to me. Oh, I shouldn't let go of it. What if all of these happen when you touch it? When you just look at it, most of the time, you have 5% of these questions.
Wow.
So when you wear a pair of gloves when decluttering, you cut the physical, you put a physical barrier between your sense of touch and the object. People are able to do longer decluttering session, be less exhausted after the decluttering session, and decluttering 40% more.
Interesting. Thank you so
It
much.
is really interesting. So wearing a pair of gloves is really a tool that comes from my training in occupational therapy that I decided to bring that to decluttering, and it really works.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If I may just make a comment. So I've been thoroughly enjoying this and resonating so deeply with it. I was actually raised by a hoarder. And everything that you're talking about really came true. Like touching an object would be a highly emotional experience. And the more that, the children of her pushed to get rid of an object, the worse it became.
Yes.
And, so I was resonating with this deeply, but I was also just thinking about when you're working with a client in this kind of capacity, what is the connection to their system? So understanding not just what's going on for them, but what it's creating for people around them. So this is sort of a selfish question, having.
No, it's totally valid.
Yeah.
And honestly, I thought for a long period of time to open some course and class to support the caregiver or the children or the parents sometime of somebody that has challenged this organization. The thing is, people don't want to say that they are linked to that. They are ashamed of it.
I have been all my life, but I'm doing it now.
Yeah, so it's really hard to find client because people won't raise their hand. But I have tools, I can support them in a sense of guiding them how to approach the situation with the other person, but also how to deal with their own situation. Because sometimes the person that has been raised by someone in a home that is a hoarding situation, sometimes they will perpetuate the pattern. And sometimes they will be the complete opposite and be minimalist.
Yeah.
And it's that pull in both directions where they feel, when they stress, they feel the need to buy things or acquire things to kind of calm down. And then when they're calmed down, it's kind of, oh my God, I have too much stuff. I need to let go of it. So it's that constant battle, a little bit like someone that has eating disorder. That is in that battle of, I want to eat, but I shouldn't eat, but like that inside battles. So it's really important to get support to be able to pass through that and be able to create the life you want, the life that the client want, not the life that has been drawn for them before.
I'm really glad you're out there doing this work and sharing this with all of us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking your question and being so vulnerable.
We've got a few minutes left. Any final questions for Valerie? And so, Valerie, really appreciate your time. Thank you for the amazing content here. Some great questions. Comments in the chat, really informative. I got one email, really sorry I had to dip off. So that's testament to you and your work. And thank you everyone else for coming. We look forward to seeing you at the other CoachME complimentary community cafes. That's a lot of C's. And have a great rest of the morning, afternoon, evening.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.